She called me at 3 in the morning, and the way she said Daddy told me everything I needed to know before she spoke another word. My daughter, my only child, the one I raised alone after her mother passed, was whispering from a bathroom in her own house, voice so small I had to press the phone hard against my ear just to hear it. I've heard a lot of terrible sounds in my life. 22 years working corrections will hollow a man out and fill him back up with things he didn't ask for. But nothing in those 2 decades prepared me for the sound of my child trying not to be heard crying in her own home. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I want to know you're out there. My name is Walter. I am 63 years old. I spent the better part of my adult life keeping dangerous people contained. Men who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. I know how predators think. I know how they choose their targets, how they move inside a space, how they keep their victims quiet and isolated and convinced that the walls closing in are somehow the victim's own fault. What I did not know until that phone call was that one of those men had been sleeping under my daughter's roof for 4 years, and that he had brought his whole family with him to help with the work. My daughter, Renee, married Marcus Webb when she was 27. I had my reservations, but I kept them to myself because she was luminous around him in the beginning. And a father who truly loves his daughter learns when to step aside and trust her. They had my grandson, Tyler, 13 months later. 7 pounds, 6 ounces, the loudest and most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life. I drove 6 hours to hold him the day he was born, and I cried in the hospital parking lot before I walked in, which I will deny to anyone who asks. For the first year or so, things seemed fine from the distance I was keeping. Renee sounded happy enough on the phone. Marcus was polite when I came to visit. Tyler was healthy and loud and completely obsessed with anything that had a siren attached to it. I told myself I had done my job. I told myself she was good. But distance is a liar, and fine from a distance is one of the most dangerous things a parent can allow themselves to believe. Then Marcus's mother, Gloria Webb, moved in. The official story was that Gloria had been having some health issues and needed family close by. The real story, which I pieced together slowly and then all at once the way you piece together anything you've been deliberately kept from understanding, was that Marcus had never in his life operated without his mother behind him. Gloria was a large woman with small eyes and an enormous need to be the most important person in every room she entered. She moved into the spare bedroom of my daughter's house, the house Renee had purchased with her own money 2 years before she and Marcus had even discussed marriage. And within a matter of months, she had rearranged the furniture to her liking, established her own rules about meals and schedules, and how the house was to be kept, and quietly installed herself as the unchallenged authority over everything that happened inside those 4 walls. Then Diane, Marcus's sister, started coming over. Every day, with a bag of snacks for herself and opinions about everything else. Renee's calls to me got shorter. Her laughs got fewer and further apart. When I asked directly whether everything was okay, she always said yes, but she said it the same exhausted way a person says, "I'm fine," when what they mean is the exact opposite of fine, and they've simply run out of the energy it takes to explain the difference. I drove out one summer and sat at their dinner table and watched Marcus speak to my daughter in a tone, not yelling, nothing so crude, but a low, dismissive tone that treated every word out of her mouth as an inconvenience. I watched Renee check Gloria's face before she answered questions I asked her, as if she needed clearance before she was permitted to have a conversation with her own father. I saw the flinch when Marcus raised his voice about something small. I saw it, and I told myself it wasn't what it looked like, and I drove home, and I hate myself for that drive to this day. The phone call changed that. Standing in my dark bedroom at 3 in the morning, I listened to my daughter whisper from a bathroom in the house she owned that Marcus had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave a mark after she had asked Gloria, very politely and very calmly, to stop feeding Tyler sugar before dinner. She told me Gloria had left. She told me Diane had told her she needed to learn her place. She told me Tyler had started wetting the bed again at 5 years old. He'd stopped at 3, and that when she tried to comfort him about it, Gloria had told her she was coddling him and making it worse, and Marcus had agreed. She told me she'd had to apologize to Gloria on Tyler's behalf for being 5 years old and afraid in his own house. By the time she stopped talking, I was already pulling on my clothes. I drove through the night and pulled into their driveway just before 7 the next morning. I had a plan, and it was not the plan of an angry man. I had spent 22 years watching what happens when force meets force directly. It is almost never clean, and it almost never produces anything lasting. I needed information first. I needed the full picture. And I needed them comfortable enough to keep showing me who they were. So I knocked on the door with a casserole dish in both hands and a tired, harmless smile on my face. Gloria answered. She looked me over the way a person looks at something they're deciding whether to move or step around. "Walter," she said. Not a greeting, just my name, flat as old concrete. "Morning, Gloria." Made Renee's favorite. Thought I'd come by and spend a few days if that's all right with everyone. My old back's been acting up, and the drive wore me out, something terrible. I sagged my shoulders a little and let the casserole dish do the rest of the talking. I have gray in my hair and lines in my face, and I have learned over 63 years that people who need to feel powerful will underestimate a man who gives them permission to do so. It is one of the most useful things I know. She stepped aside. I suppose. The house settled into my chest the moment I walked in. Clean on the surface. Gloria ran a clean house, I won't take that from her, but wrong underneath it. The walls were hung with photographs of Gloria and her children, Gloria's grandchildren, Gloria's vacations, Gloria at various family events. Not a single photograph of Renee. Not one picture of Tyler in his own home. The refrigerator, when I eventually saw it, had a crayon drawing Tyler had made at school, stuck to it with a single magnet, slightly crooked, like it had been moved and replaced and was only still there because no one had yet decided to throw it away. Renee came out of the kitchen drying her hands on a dish towel. When she saw me, something behind her eyes split open just briefly before she brought it back under control. "Daddy," she said, and she crossed the room and hugged me, and she held on about 4 seconds longer than a casual hello hug. When I put my hand on her shoulder, I could feel the edge of a bruise under her sleeve. Tyler came barreling down the hall in his socks, sliding the last 3 feet on the hardwood, and crashed directly into my legs with the full commitment of a child who has not yet learned to second-guess physical affection. "Grandpa." He wrapped his arms around my waist and pressed his face into my stomach and stayed there. I picked him up. He locked his arms around my neck and held on with a grip that told me more than anything else in that house had told me yet. I stayed 3 days on that first visit. I did not confront anyone. I watched. I had spent more than 2 decades in an environment where watching carefully and quietly was the difference between a situation that resolved and a situation that exploded, and I applied every bit of that training to those 3 days. I watched the way Gloria redirected every conversation back to herself with the practiced ease of someone who has done it so long she no longer notices she's doing it. I watched the way Diane arrived each morning with a bag of food for herself and opinions about everything in the house, and treated Renee's kitchen like a break room she was doing Renee a favor by visiting. I watched Marcus come home each evening and settle into the armchair that had been designated the best seat in the room that Renee had bought, and speak to my daughter in that tone I had heard at dinner the summer before. Low, patient in the way. Cruelty is patient when it knows it doesn't need to hurry. I watched Tyler eat alone at a small table in the corner of the kitchen because Gloria had decided at some unnamed point that predated my visit that children ate separately from adults. I watched my grandson eat his dinner 6 feet from the main table by himself in his own home. On the second night, I lay awake in the guest room, the actual guest room, because Gloria had long since taken the good spare bedroom for herself and given me the one with the window that wouldn't latch. And I listened to muffled crying from down the hall and made myself a promise. I drove home on the 4th day and made some calls. One was to a family attorney I had known for 15 years. One was to a friend who still worked in the county records office. And one was to Ray Tillman, my old supervisor from corrections, who had spent a decade as a private investigator after he retired, and who was one of the calmest, most methodical people I have ever known in my life. I told Ray what I had. I told him what I needed. He told me he'd bring his good recorder. Then I drove back. I told Renee I was staying for a while. The look on her face when I said it is something I will keep for the rest of my life. Gloria did not love the idea of an extended guest. I saw it in the set of her jaw. But I brought groceries every few days, and I fixed the stuck kitchen drawer and the window latch in the guest room and the loose railing on the back porch steps, and I stayed out of Gloria's way and did not challenge anything she said. And after about a week, she arrived at the conclusion that most people who need to feel in control arrive at when they encounter something unthreatening. She stopped paying careful attention to me. I became furniture, a harmless old man sitting at the kitchen table doing crossword puzzles and asking Tyler about fire trucks. I started documenting. I kept a small notebook in my breast pocket, the kind I had carried every day on the job for 22 years, and I noted dates and times and exact words and who was in the room. I documented Tyler's behavior, which was the most damning record of all. The flinching at raised voices, the way he went perfectly still and watchful when Marcus came home each evening, the bedwetting, the developmental regression that a child psychologist's name in my notes would eventually confirm in court. I photographed the bruise on Renee's arm with my phone. 3 weeks later, another one on her collarbone. She told me she'd bumped into the bathroom door. I wrote down exactly what she said, and I wrote down that I did not believe her. Ray arrived the following Friday with a duffel bag and a box of donuts. He introduced himself to Gloria as my old fishing buddy, and settled into the corner of whatever room I was in with the unobtrusive patience of a man who has spent a great deal of his professional life waiting for other people to say something incriminating in front of someone they'd forgotten was listening. Gloria assessed Ray the same way she'd assessed me, a large, slow-looking older man who posed no particular threat, and dismissed him. That was her first significant miscalculation. The audio recorder Ray brought was not hidden and was not illegal. In our state, one-party consent means that any participant in a conversation can record it without notifying the other parties. I was present in every room. Every conversation that occurred around me was a conversation I could legally record, and I did. 47 minutes over the course of 11 days, clipped down to the most useful portions, backed up to 3 different cloud accounts, and emailed to my attorney for safekeeping. During those same weeks, Renee was doing her own work, quietly and steadily, at my guidance and her attorney's direction. Bank statements. Mortgage records documenting that the house had been purchased in her name alone with her money before the marriage. Medical records from 3 urgent care visits spread across the prior 2 years, a sprained wrist, bruised ribs, a cut above her eye she had told the intake nurse was from a fall. The intake nurse had written, "Patient reports injury consistent with fall," with the careful, neutral phrasing of someone who had seen this before and understood her professional limitations. One Sunday afternoon, while Tyler napped and Gloria was at Diane's and Marcus was out, Renee sat down across from me at the kitchen table and told me everything from the beginning. Not the edited version, not the version she had been constructing and reconstructing for 4 years to make it more manageable and less frightening and easier for herself to live inside. All of it. She talked for nearly 2 hours without stopping, and I did not say a single word until she was finished. When she looked up at the end of it, she had the expression of someone bracing for a verdict. I told her she was the bravest person I had ever known. I told her that nothing she had described, not one moment, not one choice, not one thing she had done was her fault. She put her forehead down on the table and cried in the sustained, deep way that a person cries when they have been holding something in for longer than the body was designed to hold things. "I didn't want to worry you," she said. "Renee," I said, "worrying about you is the best job I have ever had in my life." The trap came together in the 3rd week of my second stay, and it came together the way the best traps do, not through elaborate engineering, but through creating the right conditions and then trusting people to be exactly who they are. My attorney had advised that the strongest possible position would combine the documentation I had with a witnessed incident, something that happened in real time in front of verifiable observers. Ray was my observer. The recordings were my foundation. What I needed was a catalyst. I asked Renee to raise the account. There was a separate bank account she had opened at her attorney's instruction. Her own earnings moved into an account only she could access, which was her legal right, and which Marcus had noticed and been quietly, coldly furious about for weeks. She had calmed it down before. I asked her to uncalm it. She picked a Thursday evening. Diane was over for dinner. Gloria was in the living room. Ray and I were at the kitchen table with coffee. 2 old men barely registering in the background of anyone's attention. Renee brought up the account at dinner. Calmly, steadily, in the voice of a woman who has decided she is done apologizing for what is hers. Marcus's tone dropped to that register I had been documenting for weeks. Patient contempt. "We talked about this, Renee." "I know we did," she said, "but it's my money. I earned it. Everything in this house is shared," Gloria called from the other room without looking up. "That's what marriage is." "Actually," Renee said, loud enough to carry, "the house is in my name. I bought it before we were married. So technically the house itself is." Marcus's chair scraped the floor. He was on his feet. "Don't throw that in my face again." Diane leaned forward and said, in the tone of someone who has made the same observation many times and found it amusing every time, "She always does this. Thinks owning the house makes her something special. You ought to remind her what she'd have without this family around her." "What exactly," I said from my chair at the kitchen table, "does that mean?" The room stopped. Everyone looked at me. I had been so consistently quiet for so many weeks that I think most of them had genuinely forgotten I was capable of entering a conversation uninvited. "Stay out of it, Walter," Marcus said. "This is my daughter's house," I said. I kept my voice level. I did not need to raise it. "That's my grandson upstairs. So I'd like someone to explain to me what she would have without this family. Because from where I've been sitting for 11 weeks, what she's got because of this family is documented bruises and a child who flinches at loud noises." The room went electric in the way a room goes when something that has been said in private for a very long time gets said out loud for the first time. Marcus took 2 steps toward me. His face was flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about." I have 11 weeks of what I'm talking about written down in this notebook. I set it on the table. Dates, times, exact words. I also have recordings and medical records and a family attorney who has been in contact with a family court commissioner since last Tuesday. Ray shifted in his chair beside me. A small shift, barely visible, but the kind that anyone with experience in physical confrontation would read immediately as a man settling his weight. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Marcus stopped moving. Gloria came to the kitchen doorway. The sweet, vicious expression I had spent 11 weeks watching had dropped away entirely, and what was underneath it was harder and colder. "I think it's past time you went home, Walter. You've overstayed your welcome." "It's my daughter's house," I said, for the third time. "I don't need your permission to be in it, but I would like everyone's attention for about 3 minutes because I want to play something and I want to make sure I have the context right." I picked up my phone. Let me know if any of this needs clarification. I pressed play. What came out of that speaker was 4 minutes and 12 seconds of audio from a Tuesday afternoon 2 weeks prior, when I had been doing a crossword at the kitchen table, and Gloria had walked in with Diane and conducted, at full conversational volume, an extended discussion of my daughter's intelligence, her worth as a wife, her competence as a mother, her fundamental value as a human being, said in her own kitchen, in her own home, while Renee was upstairs putting Tyler down for a nap. Said with the comfortable certainty of women who have been saying these things for 4 years without any consequence. Diane went pale. Gloria's jaw went tight. "You can't record people without their knowledge. That's illegal." "One-party consent," I said. "I was in the room for the entire conversation. It is completely and entirely legal. Your attorney can verify that." "It's out of context," Gloria said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "It's 47 minutes of recordings across 11 days," I said. "I selected what I thought were the most representative portions. We are welcome to listen to the full recordings if you would prefer more context." Marcus turned and looked at his mother with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not remorse, not yet, but the look of a man who is suddenly aware that the architecture of the life he has been living was built on a foundation other people laid, and that foundation has just become visible for the first time. "Ma, what did you—" "It doesn't matter," Diane said, and she stepped forward with the hot certainty of someone who has never in her life been held accountable for anything and cannot yet process that this moment is different from all the other moments. "You think some old man with a notebook is going to undo 4 years? You think anyone is going to take your word over Marcus's? Over this family's?" She pointed at me, voice rising. "You drove up here to cause trouble, and you are going to regret that. Marcus, your mother and I will handle this old man right now." She reached across and grabbed Renee's arm. The same bruise. I stood up. My knees are not what they were. My back reminds me regularly that I am 63 years old and have spent decades on concrete floors, but I stood up from that chair and I looked at Diane's hand on my daughter's arm. And whatever was in my face in that moment was apparently sufficient, because Diane let go. Ray had his phone out, filming, from the moment Diane had reached across the table. "I'm noting for the record," I said, to both my phone and Ray's, "that I have asked you to leave this property. This is Renee Collins's home. Her name is on the deed and has been since before this marriage. You have no legal right to remain here, and I am asking all 3 of you to leave now." They left. It was not graceful, and it was not quiet, and there were things said on the way out the door that I am glad Tyler did not hear from his room upstairs. But they left. Marcus was the last one. He stood in the kitchen for a moment after his mother and sister had gone out the front door, looking at the documents spread across the table, looking at Renee, looking at me. I think he understood in that moment that something was finished. Not just the argument, but the whole long shape of the life he had been operating inside of. "I want to fix this," he said. His voice was different, without the contempt in it. Smaller, the voice of someone who has just seen himself clearly for the first time in a long while and does not particularly like what he's looking at. "That conversation," I said, "is not with me. That's between you and my daughter, and between both of you and your attorneys." He looked at Renee. "My lawyer will be in touch," she said, and she walked out of the kitchen. In the months that followed, things moved the way legal proceedings move, grinding and methodical, with occasional moments of sudden clarity. The recordings were submitted. The medical records were submitted. Ray's video of Diane grabbing Renee was submitted. The family court reviewed Tyler's behavioral documentation and ordered a child psychological evaluation, which confirmed what the records showed. The house had always been in Renee's name and remained there. Marcus's access to Tyler was supervised during the initial period of proceedings. Gloria and Diane, facing exposure of the recordings in any potential litigation, agreed through their attorney to a restraining order keeping them off the property. I stayed through all of it. I drove Tyler to school some mornings and picked him up some afternoons and sat with him at the main dinner table, not the small corner table, and made coffee while Renee was on calls with her attorney. And some evenings we sat together on the back porch and watched the light go out of the sky, and didn't need to say much. About 2 months after the evening in the kitchen, Tyler climbed into my lap while I was reading on that back porch. He sat there quietly for a while, watching the yard the way a child watches things when they are working something out. "Grandpa," he said. "Yeah, buddy. Is everything going to be okay?" I thought about how to answer that honestly without qualifying it into something useless. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, it is." He thought about this for a while. "Because you're here? Because your mom is strong," I said. "I'm just here to remind her of that when she forgets." He nodded, which indicated he found this satisfactory, and then climbed off my lap and ran across the yard to investigate something interesting near the fence. I watched him run and thought about the night drive and the dark bedroom and the phone against my ear, and I thought about the 4 years before that phone call. 4 years of fine from a distance. 4 years of telling myself that a grown woman manages her own life, which is true, but which I had been using as an excuse to avoid driving 6 hours and sitting down in a kitchen and paying attention. I am not telling you this story so you'll think I did something heroic. I am 63 years old and my back aches, and I cried in the school pickup line the first morning. Tyler waved to me from across the parking lot without checking over his shoulder first to make sure it was safe to show that he was happy. That is not the behavior of a hero. That is the behavior of a grandfather who came too late and is still grieving the years he didn't come sooner. But I am telling you this because I know there is someone listening right now who got a call or who noticed something wrong in someone's voice on the phone and told themselves there wasn't really anything they could do. There is always something you can do. You show up. You stay. You keep a notebook in your breast pocket and you write down dates and times and exact words. You stand in the kitchen and you do not move. You trust that love and patience and 22 years of understanding how predators operate is a more durable weapon than anything loud or fast or angry. I won't tell you that the way I got there was perfect, because it wasn't. The mistake I made wasn't in how I confronted them. The mistake was the 4 years I spent telling myself it wasn't my place to look more carefully. It is always your place. The people you love have always been your place. Every family has someone who is being slowly diminished in their own home, convinced they deserve it, afraid to say so out loud. And every family has someone who has more strength than they've been given credit for. Someone who, if they will just show up and stay and pay attention, can change the entire shape of what is possible. Be that person. Before the phone call at 3 in the morning. before the 4 years. Now, if this story reached you tonight, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and every one of you who spends time here with us at Voices of Uncle Leonard is the reason I keep telling these stories. Thank you for being here.